And who can sit there and say go on?
Come on, Roman Catholics, I want to hear it. Well, welcome to St. George's as we continue our presentations tonight. Last week we began with a general introduction on the Eastern Catholic Churches, and tonight we continue with the largest, the Ukrainian Catholic Church. And it is with great pleasure that we have with us tonight. Tonight we have a native son of Ukraine, Subdeacon Andriy Celt. Subdeacon Andriy will present to us the Ukrainian Catholic Church, a little bit of history, a little bit of liturgical stuff, a little bit of everything. It's so hard to bring a particular church in, introduction and history in 45, 50 minutes, but he's going to try his best tonight. And Subdeacon Andriy, after the fall of the Soviet Union, was one of the first seminarians to enter into formation. By his bishop, he was sent to the United States, where he continued his studies at our St. Basil's College in Stamford, Connecticut. After completing his studies in Stamford, he continued his studies in theology at our Seminary of St. Josephat in Washington, D.C., the Catholic University of America, which he completed. He received his minor orders, and now we continue to pray for him as he continues his pastoral year here at St. George's, assisting here in this parish family. And now he will continue with his presentation tonight on the life, on the history of the Ukrainian Catholic Church. Welcome.
Thank you very much for a warm welcome, Father Valerian. And I'm really honored to talk about my church, since I've been in it for at least since 1990s, when our church came out of the catacombs. Before it, we were really underground, and most of my village, called Verkhnye, we were Catholics in hiding, going to the Orthodox Church for many, many years. And when the religious freedom was available to us, everyone in my village, maybe except for one or two families, said, "Hey, we are Greek Catholics, and we're taking over our church back." Because all the property of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church was transferred to the Orthodox Church in 1946, the so-called Lviv Synod, which was, of course, illegitimate. And since then, our church has flourished in Ukraine and is spreading all over Ukraine, not just the West. And as Father just told me that the new patriarch is creating 3 metropolises in Ukraine, so that's going to strengthen our positions in Ukraine as well, and hopefully our faith and knowledge about our church. All right, Ukrainian Catholic Church is a wonderful way to God. Yes, sir.
You said 3 metropolias. How is that divided by region?
There's going to be a metropolia in Lviv, Ternopil.
Yeah, I'll bring it up. We'll continue that during the question-answer session. I'll answer that. It just came
Father
up today.
probably knows better.
Yeah, I'll
I just heard it from him today. Thank you. So there is but one goal we all have to pursue, and that is the ultimate union with God. The question, however, is how can we do that? If you ask people, one person will give you one answer, another will say something else, and yet another person totally different. The truth is, there is not just one way to God, but so many of them. If we were to say that there is one and only way to God, we would be limiting God, who is indeed limitless. One of the ways to God is the Ukrainian Catholic Church. And it's a wonderful church, rich in history, though thorny history, with many beautiful traditions, beautiful chants, and beautiful architecture. When I ask some of the people I meet that they know what they know about the Ukrainian Catholic Church, I very often get, oh, that's that church down the street that makes wonderful pierogies. And indeed, it is true about the pierogi. Their fame has spread all across the United States, just like our church. The Ukrainian Catholic Church is indeed a wonderful way to God and is open to everybody. To understand the nature of this institution, we have to look into its history. In order to see what this church is, we just have to look at where it came from. Ukraine is the country where our roots have started. Ukraine is a country in Eastern Europe. It has an area of over 600,000 kilometers, which is about a little bit more than the size of Texas, and is the second largest country in Europe after the Russian Federation. It borders Russia, of course, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, Belarus, of course the Black Sea and Sea of Azov, and across the sea, the Turkey. And this country had a very diverse and thorny history. It was established by Varangians in the 9th century, the medieval state called the Kievan Rus. The first East Slavic state emerged as a powerful nation in the Middle Ages, until it, of course, disintegrated in the 12th century because of the internal conflicts of interests and ambitious rulers. By the middle of the 14th century, Ukrainian territories were under the rule of 3 external powers: the Golden Horde, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and the Kingdom of Poland. After the Great Northern War in 1700s, Ukraine was divided between a number of regional powers, and by the 19th century, the largest part of Ukraine was integrated into the Russian Empire, with the rest under the Austro-Hungarian control. A chaotic period of constant warfare ensued, with several attempts at independence from 1970 and 1941, following World War I and the Russian Civil War. Ukraine emerged from the fighting on December 30, 1922, as one of the founding republics of the Soviet Union. The Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic Republic's territory was enlarged westwards shortly before the World War II, and southwards in 1954 with the addition of the Crimean Republic, which we call today the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. In 1945, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic became one of the founding members of the United Nations. Ukraine became independent again with the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. This dissolution started a period of transition to a market economy in which Ukraine was stricken with the 8-year recession. I remember our currency falling down in comparison to dollar by day. It was a very scary experience, and people were trying to buy things and they did not know how much their money was worth. Since then, however, the economy, of course, experienced a high recovery, and Ukraine was put up again in the worldwide economic crisis in 2008, and the economy plunged again. As we see, the history of Ukraine was very thorny. Its people suffered a lot of hardship from its neighboring countries, as well as from its own internal divisions. In between all these political interests and ambitions, many innocent people have died. In the time when Ukraine was enslaved by the Russian Empire, the Ukrainian people had to work in slavery. Many people died from mistreatment, and many have suffered a martyr's death. However, the worst act of malice we have to mention today is the genocide of 1932-1933, when people of Ukraine were starved to death by the Soviet regime, when about 10 million people were starved to death in order to exterminate the Ukrainian people. And when I was studying in Connecticut, not far from New York, we always, I believe it's every December, we went to New York and marched to show the recognition of these terrible years that that Ukrainian people underwent, so people could remember it. In the 20th century, under the Soviet rule, any sign of nationalism or religious freedom was suppressed by the authorities. In order to understand the state of the Ukrainian church, we need to realize that the history of Ukraine had a big influence on the Ukrainian church. The church was the place where people could go and have some kind of identity, a Christian, where the political interests of other countries did not matter, but only Christ and all His encompassing love and mercy mattered. So, what is the Ukrainian Catholic Church? The Ukrainian Catholic Church is the largest Eastern Rite Catholic sui juris, or particular church in full communion with the Holy See, and is directly subject to the Pope. The primate, or the head of the church, holds the office of Archbishop, Major Archbishop of Kiev, Halych, and all Rus. And today, the current Major Archbishop, or we like to call him Patriarch, we try to promote that title for him, is the Sviatoslav Shevchuk. And one of our seminarians actually is his brother. I went to seminary with him. The Patriarch, and we have requested papal recognition of and the elevation to this title. The church is one of the successor churches to the acceptance of Christianity by the Grand Prince Vladimir the Great of Kiev in 988. The story goes that the great Prince Vladimir, who wanted to unify his lands under one religion, sent his emissaries to Constantinople in order to see what the Eastern Church was all about. When these delegates came to the Constantinople, they entered the Hagia Sophia, the beautiful church at that time, and they could not see if they were on heaven on earth when they entered the church, for such beauty was in front of them. Because of that, the great Prince Vladimir chose the Byzantine Christianity as the state religion in 988, baptizing all his people. In the modern times, the church has followed the spread of the Ukrainian diaspora and now has some 40 hierarchs in over a dozen countries on 4 continents, including 3 other metropolitans in Poland, the United States, and Canada. The head of the church is Major Bishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk since March 2011. This is the great Vladimir the Great. All right. So let's look a little bit more deeply into the history of our church, especially before the Union of Brest. The Ukrainian Catholic Church, as it is now, did not really exist as such until the Union of Brest in the late 16th century. But its roots go back to the very beginning of Christianity in medieval Slavic state of Rus. The area of modern-day Ukraine was primarily influenced by Byzantine missionaries. The mission of Saint Cyril and Methodius was especially important as their development of the Cyrillic alphabet, which we as Ukrainians use today, as well as the neighboring countries such as Belarus, Russia, and Moldova. And as a side note, we do still use the Church Slavonic in our worship, especially in our eparchy, and the other place where we use the Slavonic language is in Ukraine by one order of students, which we will talk about a little later. Following the Mongol annihilation of Kiev in the 13th century, the Metropolitan of Kiev moved to Vladimir in 1299. By 1326, the Metropolitan had settled in Moscow, and by 1328 had changed the title of Metropolitan of Kiev to the Metropolitan of Moscow. By 1453, the Church of Rus was separated into separate Russian or Muscovite and Ruthenian or Kievan metropolitan. This situation continued for some time, and in the intervening years, what is now Western and Central Ukraine came under the rule of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The Polish king Zygmunt III was heavily influenced by the ideals of counter-reformation and wanted to increase the Catholic presence on his lands, especially between the Ukrainians, or at that time the Ruthenians, as we were called. Meanwhile, the clergy of the Ruthenian lands were ruled from distant Constantinople, and much of the population showed loyalty to the Orthodoxy rather than the Catholic monarchy. And this persecution of the Orthodox population grew. And under pressure of Polish authorities, the clergy of the Ruthenian Church agreed by the Union of Brest in 1595 to break from the Patriarch of Constantinople and unite with the Catholic Church under the sponsorship of the ruler of the Commonwealth, Zygmunt III, in response for ending the persecution. The union was not accepted by all the members of the Greek Church in these lands and marked the beginning of the creation of separate Ukrainian Catholic Church and Ukrainian Orthodox churches on lands of Ukraine and Belarus. The final step of the full particularity of the Ukrainian Catholic Church was then affected by the development of the Middle Ruthenian language into separate Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian languages around 1600s to 1800s. With Orthodoxy being largely suppressed during the 2 centuries of the Polish rule, the Greek Catholic influence of the Ukrainian population was so great that in several territories hardly any remained Orthodox. In the years to come, the Ukrainian Catholic Church was tossed around by the Latin and Russian Orthodox interests. However, the Greek Catholic Church still remained a separate church, despite all the persecution and tendencies of some of the faithful to convert to either the Russian Orthodox or the Latin churches. In Russian part of the occupied Ukraine, the dissolution of the Greek Catholic Church was complete in 1875 with the abolition of the Eparchy of Kol. The Ukrainian Church, the Greek Catholic Church in the Polish territories, we still remain strong. With the elimination of Ruthenian Catholics on the territory of the Russian Empire during the 19th century, the Pope of Rome granted the transfer of patriarchal powers of the major archiepiscopate of the Kiev, Halych, and Belarus to the Metropolitan of Lviv in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. By the end of the century, by the end of the 19th century, the faithful of our church began immigrating to the United States, Canada, and Brazil. In Austrian-Polish partition that included Halych, the Greek Catholic, Ruthenian, or Ukrainian peasantry was largely under the Polish Latin Catholic domination. The Austrians granted equal legal privileges to the Greek Catholic Church and removed Polish influence. They also mandated that Uniate seminarians receive a formal higher education. It was a big step for the Ukrainian Church, since before that the priests were educated by their fathers, and the title of the priests were handed from father to father. This is the way they were educated in theological seminaries and could serve our people better. This led to the appearance, for the first time, of large, educated social class within the Ukrainian population in Halych, which Halych is a part of Ukraine where, which occupies Lviv Oblast, some Ivano-Frankivsk and Ternopil Oblasts. As a result of these reforms, within the Austrian Halych, over the next century, the Greek Catholic Church ceased being a puppet of foreign interests and became the primary cultural force within the Ukrainian community. Among the political trends emerging from the priests of their families, the Christian social movement was particularly linked to the Ukrainian Catholic Church. For many people, the Austrians were seen as having saved the Ukrainians and their church from the Poles. Ukrainian Greek Catholics found themselves under the governance of the nations of Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Czechoslovakia after the World War I. Under the previous century of Austrian rule, when the Ukrainian Catholic Church really prospered, we attained such a strong Ukrainian national character that in the interwar Poland, the Greek Catholics of Galicia were seen by the nationalist Polish people and Catholic state as even less reliable than the Orthodox. Carrying its colonization policies throughout its eastern territories, the Polish authorities sought to weaken the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in various ways. In 1924, following a visit with the Ukrainian Catholic believers in North America and Western Europe, the head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church was initially denied re-entry to Lviv, only being allowed back after considerable delay. And the name of that bishop, of course, was Andriy. Polish or Latin Rite Roman Catholic priests, led by their Latin bishops, began to undertake missionary work among Greek Catholics, and administrative restrictions were placed on the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. In the aftermath of World War II, placed almost all native Ukrainian Catholics under the rule of the Soviet Union and Soviet bloc, which, using the position of only a few ex-Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church leading clergymen, tried to gain control over the church. Soviet documents of 1945 indicate a collaboration between Joseph Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev, and Patriarch Alexei I of Moscow to decimate the Greek Catholic Church in then recently annexed western areas of Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. This dissident ex-Ukrainian Greek Catholic clergy called a synod, Lviv Sobor, or 1946, in Lviv, and this synod annulled the Union of Brest of 1596 and all of its statutes. The ex-priest Gavril Kostennik was forced or convinced to preside over this Lviv Sobor in 1946, probably due to blackmailing by the Soviet secret police and other persuasive policies they had. Ironically, as all the bishops of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church were imprisoned, this synod was of course illegitimate and did not carry any power. But that was enough for the Soviet regime to get rid of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and all its property was transferred to the Orthodox Church. Thus, officially, all the church property was transferred to the Russian Orthodox Church under the Moscow Patriarchate. Some Ukrainian Greek Catholic clergy went underground. This catacomb church was strongly supported by the diaspora, us, created by the mass immigration to the Western Hemisphere, which had begun already in the 1870s and increased at the end of the World War II. In the winter of 1944-45, Catholic clergy were summoned to re-education sessions by the secret police. And near the end of the war in Europe, the state media began anti-Catholic campaign. The creation of the community of 1596 was discredited in publications that would later appear, which went to the great pains to try to prove that the Catholic Church was conducting activities directly against Ukrainians in the first half of the 20th century. In 1945, Soviet authorities arrested, deported, and sentenced to forced labor camps in Siberia and elsewhere the Church's Metropolitan Joseph Slipy and 9 other Greek Catholic bishops. All the above-mentioned bishops and significant part of clergy died in prisons, concentration camps, internal exile, or soon after their release during the post-Stalin era. And in 2001, when Pope John Paul II came to Ukraine, he proclaimed many of these martyrs that died for their faith in concentration camps blessed on the way to sainthood. The exception, the one who didn't die, was Joseph Slipy, who after 11 years of imprisonment and persecution was released thanks to the intervention of Pope John XXIII. And he arrived in Rome, where he received the title of Major Archbishop of Lviv and became cardinal in 1965. The Ukrainian Catholics continued to exist underground for decades and were the subjects of various vigorous attacks of the state media. the clergy gave up public exercise of their clerical duties, but secretly provided services for many lay people. Many priests took up civilian professions and celebrated sacraments in secret. The identities of former priests could have been known to the Soviet authorities, who regularly watched them, interrogated them, and put fines on them, but stopped short of arrest unless their activities went beyond a small circle of people. New secretly ordained priests were often treated more harshly. I remember my mom was telling me about the persecution that was at that time. That, for example, on Sunday, a principal of the school was standing in front of the church and just write down the names who went to church. And then they were called into a principal's office the next day, on Monday, and received a punishment. Either they have to clean something in usually it's bathroom, and they didn't care. My mom and my family did not pay attention, because the church was the place where they could, without prejudice, be whatever they wanted to be. Those years, 1945 to 50, after Stalin died, Ukrainian Catholics hoped this would lead to better conditions for themselves. But such hopes were dashed in the late 50s, when the authorities arrested even more priests and unleashed a new wave of anti-Catholic propaganda. Secret ordinations occurred in exile, secret theological seminaries in Ternopil and Kolomea were reported in the Soviet press in 1960s, when their organizers were arrested. In 1974, for example, a clandestine convent was uncovered in Lviv. During the Soviet era, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church did flourish throughout the Ukrainian diaspora. And we will talk about our church in the United States a little bit later. Cardinal Joseph Stepik was jailed as a dissident, but named a secret cardinal in 1949. He was freed in 1963 and was the subject of extensive campaign to have him named as a patron, which met with strong support as well as controversy. Pope Paul VI demurred but compromised with the creation of new title of Major Archbishop, with the jurisdiction roughly equivalent to that of a patriarch in the Eastern Church. This title has since passed to Miroslav Ivan Lubachevsky in 1984, and thereafter to Lyubomir Huzar in 2000. And both of these are the natives of the United States. And after that, of course, in recent history, since March 2011, the patriarch is the Sviatoslav Shevchuk. In those years, activities that could lead to arrest during the Soviet era in Ukraine included holding religious services, educating children as Catholics, performing baptisms, conducting weddings or funerals, hearing confessions or giving the last rites, copying religious materials, possessing prayer books, possessing icons, possessing church calendars, possessing religious books or other sacred objects. All these things we take for granted here were illegal, and one could really suffer persecution, and in some cases death. Conferences were held to discuss how to perfect the methodology of combating Ukrainian Catholicism in the Western Ukraine. But by the late 1980s, there was a shift in the Soviet government's attitude towards religion. At the height of Mikhail Gorbachev's liberation reforms, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church emerged from the catacombs to find itself largely in disarray, with nearly all of its property, pre-1946 parishes and property, lost to the Orthodox faith. The weakened Soviet authorities were unable to pacify the situation, and most of the parishes in Halichina came under the control of the Greek Catholics during the events of a large-scale interconfessional rivalry that was often accompanied by violent clashes of the faithful provoked by the religious and political leaders. I remember in those days, I was still a little boy and have witnessed those violent tensions between the Ukrainian Catholics and the Orthodox. These tensions led to rupture of the relationship between the Moscow Patriarchate and the Vatican. But this had to be done because that belonged to us. That's when I asked a priest that was organizing the takeover, that's what his reply was. Currently, our church has between 3 and 5 million supporters in Ukraine. Numerous surveys conducted since the late 1990s consistently show that between 6 and 8% of the Ukrainian total population, or 9 to 12 of the country's religious believers, identify themselves as belonging to the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Worldwide, the faithful now number some 6 to 10 million, forming the largest particular Catholic church after the majority Latin Rite Church. Within Ukraine, the Greek Catholic Church is increasing at the expense of the majority Orthodox Church due to the high birth rates and lower death rates among its members. Today, most Ukrainian Catholic churches have moved away from Church Slavonic and use Ukrainian. Many churches also offer liturgies in the official language of the country the church is in. For example, German in Germany, or English in the United States and Canada. However, some parishes continue to celebrate the liturgy in Slavonic even today, and services in a mix of languages are not unusual, especially in our eparchy of St. Joseph. Very often we hear the beautiful Church Slavonic chants. In Ukraine, only the Studites use the language, for example, in a very famous Univ Lavra. As a side note, numerous on-foot pilgrimages occur each year to this holy place in order to celebrate services and pray together. Pilgrimages are very popular events in Ukraine. We have many holy places to which people gather and walk on the highways to the church. For example, Zaranitsa probably is the biggest pilgrimage place to which people go. I remember they said it's about 1 million or 2 million people came to this holy place. In the early first decade of the 21st century, construction of a new cathedral began for the transfer of the major see of the Ukrainian Catholic Church back to the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. However, this move remains controversial for some Ukrainian Catholics, like me, who view Lviv in the western Ukraine as a real stronghold of Ukrainian Catholicism. Having supported and protected the Ukrainian Catholic Church through the long periods of persecution, moving the Ukrainian Catholic Church to Kiev, therefore, has taken on political overtones in the church. The move tends to be supported by those people who favor the appointment of a Ukrainian Catholic Patriarch to oversee the Ukrainian Catholic Church. As we have said before, due to different historical circumstances, many Ukrainians left their motherland starting about 1870s. in order to find a better life for their families. One such place was the United States of America, which promised equal opportunity for everybody, especially the freedom to retain tradition and religion. Our first immigrants to America perhaps intended to return to their old country when the time was right, but after several years they realized as all the good they received in America and decided to stay. And I quote, that which Ukrainian immigrants were looking for in the United States, they found. They even found more, because aside from work, wages, still something what they did not have in the old country and for which they had not traveled to the United States, but they felt its absence, liberty, and the respect on the individual dignity. A priest for the faithful in the United States arrived in 1884 and blessed their first church building in Shenandoah, Pennsylvania, that same year. These Catholics were placed under jurisdiction of the Latin ordinaries of the places and of residence by virtue of the apostolic letter of Leo XIII. In 1807, Bishop Soter Stefan Ortinsky was appointed the ecclesiastical superior, but he had to procure actual jurisdiction as a vicar general from the Latin ordinary of each community where the faithful had settled. In 1913, Bishop Ortinsky was accorded full jurisdiction and independence from the Latin ordinaries under the vigilance of the apostolic delegate in Washington, D.C. Bishop Ortinsky died prematurely on March 24, 1916. World War I had severed communications with the dioceses of origin of Austro-Hungary. The Holy See did not then appoint another bishop, but ordered the apostolic delegate to assign 2 priests as temporary administrators, one for the faithful who came from the ecclesiastical province of Lviv, and another for those whose origin was in some part of the kingdoms that call Hungary and Croatia. This division implied the permission for either group of the faithful to detach themselves from an existing parish and found one of their own, defined either according to the creation of regional origin or language, which was to be decided by the majority of the faithful in each parish. Smaller groups chose sometimes not to separate themselves and to stay with the majority in the local parish. This separation was made permanent when in 1924 bishop ordinaries were appointed for each group. For the faithful and parishes who trace their origin to the province of Lviv, the seat of the ordinary Bishop Konstantin Bohachevsky was established on May 20, 1924. During Pope Pius XII created on July 20, 1956 the Eparchy of Stamford, Connecticut, assigning it to its parishes situated in the state of New York and New England, and appointing its first titular Bishop Ambrose Sinitian, previously auxiliary in Philadelphia. The same Roman pontiff erected on July 12, 1958, the ecclesiastical province of Philadelphia, consisting of the Archieparchy of Philadelphia, of the Ukrainians, and the Eparchy of Stamford, Connecticut. Pope John XXIII separated the western part of Archieparchy of Philadelphia on July 14, 1961, comprising all the states of the United States of America west of the western boundary of Ohio, and on the west of the Missouri and Missouri rivers, and established as the eparchy of St. Nicholas in Chicago. Bishop Yaroslav Gabro was installed at the time of the canonical erection of the eparchy on December 12, 1961, as its first bishop. Pope John Paul II created on December 5, 1983, the eparchy of St. Joseph in Parma, Ohio, comprising the states of Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, North and South Carolina, West Virginia, and Western Pennsylvania. Bishop Robert Moskal was installed at the time of canonical erection of new eparchy on February 1984 as its first bishop. As a result of this separation, the Metropolitan Archeparchy of Philadelphia includes the District of Columbia, the states of Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, and eastern Pennsylvania to the eastern boundaries of the counties of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Archbishop of Philadelphia is the metropolitan for the Ukrainian eparchies of the United States, which have their seats in Stamford, in Connecticut, Chicago, Illinois, and Parma, Ohio. And the current bishops of our church in the United States, of course, are the Metropolitan Stefan Soroka, the John Bura, who is the administrator of the eparchy of St. Joseph at our eparchy, Most Reverend Paul Homnitsky, Bishop of Stamford eparchy, and of course Most Reverend Richard Semenek, the eparchy of Chicago. As for the liturgical life, there are many different services in our church. Among them, the center is the celebration of Eucharist, we call the Divine Liturgy. All other services are a preparation for it. Among them are the Vespers, the first, the third, the sixth, the ninth hour, the Compline, and so many other services. The full liturgical life can be witnessed in monasteries, and that's why the monasteries, the pilgrimages to monasteries in Ukraine are so popular, because of the prayer life these monks lead. The liturgical calendar is filled with celebrations of the events of Christ's life and the ones of the saints. However, our church celebrates these 12 main feasts listed here. Of course, this Nativity of our Mother, and we celebrate all these throughout the year. If you don't mind, I'll just list them here. Right? Exaltation of the Cross, presentation of the Theotokos in the temple, the Nativity of Christ, Theophany, the presentation of Jesus at the temple, Annunciation, the Easter, the resurrection of our Lord, Palm Sunday, the Ascension of Christ, the Pentecost, the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles, the Transfiguration, and the Dormition. Among other important liturgical periods are the fasts. Great fasts before Easter, during which we celebrate the liturgy of the presanctified gifts and special services for the dead on Saturday, and the liturgy of St. Basil on Sundays. Other fasts include the fast of St. Peter, the Dormition fast, and the Christmas fast we call the Philip's fast, and which we prepare for the birth of Christ. The architecture of the Ukrainian Catholic Churches is very beautiful and diverse. We are always recognized for our embellished churches with the golden domes. We have big cathedrals of different styles dating all the way to the Middle Ages. We also have modern styles, but also we have to know the beauty inside of our churches. But before that, just 5 more slides, please. It will show the different styles of churches we have in the United States especially. And of course, as we see, all of them is like this is this is very modern. This is, I believe, St. Joseph's Church in Chicago.
You have the picture of the interior of that?
Unfortunately not. But it's very modern. Okay.
That's not it.
As I said, the interior of our churches is just splendid. Many churches, near every corner of the church is covered with some kind of painting of a saint or icon. Among the most famous architectural, internal architectural creations of our church is the iconostasis, which separates the altar from the temple of the faithful. And we have to look at this as this iconostasis as the window into the divine. For contemplating the iconostasis, we can really come into a deeper relationship with God. For it has so much deepness to it. For example, the traditional iconostasis, as we see it here, of course, the real doors with the Mother of God on the left and Christ on the right. It has the patron saint and Saint Nicholas on both sides. It has also the apostles on upper right here, who are surrounding Christ in the middle. We have the 12 major feasts of our church right above it, which show how the people of God were saved. And of course, the very upper level of the iconostasis is showing the prophets from the Bible. Now, the chant in the Ukrainian Catholic Church is polyphonic, making it a community-oriented, especially when the choir sings. Some of the choirs I have heard are very beautiful in big churches such like as in St. George's in Ukraine or New York. We have nice choir in our church today. They sing very nice and beautiful, right, Father?
Yes.
Yes. Now, there are different kinds of liturgical tones in our church. There are the resurrection tones, for example, sung for chokers and conducts during the Divine Liturgy. Some Ohlasny tones, sung usually during the Vespers or Matins. And Bulgarian tones, sung during Great Vespers for Lydia. And that is not all. There are so many other melodies that are sung on special occasions like Great Fast or major feasts of our calendar, making the richness of the Ukrainian chant more and more vivid. And I know this because I went to Ukrainian school of chant in Lviv, and it took about 3 years to learn all the chants of our church. That's how much time you had to spend to be competent in all the chants we have. To summarize, we have looked at Ukraine and its history. Ukraine and its history, and how it really shaped the Ukrainian Catholic Church through so much persecution, suffering, and deaths. Today, we are able to stand up and sing, Lord have mercy in freedom and safety, without anybody looking over our shoulder. Our history was thorny, but it also brought us to this continent. Just like the United States is diverse, so is the Ukrainian Catholic Churches. Depending when the people came to this country, there are different mentalities. The Ukrainians that came about the time of World War II are different from the Ukrainians that came 10 or 20 years ago. There are differences in language they speak. Hence, some parishes are more Ukrainian culture-oriented, others American culture-oriented. Some parishes prefer Ukrainian to be used in services. Some people like the English as a language to be used in the services. It is, and this diversity is not a bad thing. The Ukrainian Catholic Church is not only for Ukrainians. It is called to spread the gospel to everybody, just as Christ has commanded. With the Ukrainian Church spread throughout the world, we are truly a universal church called to bring everybody to church through our beautiful traditions and beliefs. Just as we make people hungry for pierogi, we have to make them hungry for Christ, giving them the delicious taste of Christ through our heritage. We are to bring heaven to earth in our churches. This way we all will be with Christ in heaven. Thank you very much.